Okay, thank you for joining us here, Vatican III discussion. My name is Tomasio, and I am here with Joseph Venditti. Joe, how you doing?
Good. Let's start out. What is the San Damiano? What's the history for people that don't know? Just a very brief, succinct, overview.
Okay, the San Damiano was an icon that was found by St. Francis of Assisi in an abandoned chapel outside of Assisi, Italy, that perhaps a retired priest of some sort was living there. But Francis was running from the war, running from his dad, his family. He found shelter there at this chapel, and while he was there, he discovered this icon that had no name as far as an artist, but it was obviously done by a professional artist. And it was just left in a, pile of trash, ruins, in this abandoned chapel. And Francis took a liking to this icon. He brushed it off, cleaned it up, put it up on the altar in a more of a reverent. And he claims that it started talking to him. And it asked him by name to please clean up this church. And Francis very literally felt that this talking icon wanted him to rebuild this chapel that had just fallen apart. So Francis all of a sudden had vision and focus in his life, and the only way he could get the tools to rehab this chapel was to basically take his inheritance, take his dad's possessions, which were going to be left to Francis. And that's what he did. He took some of his dad's linens, cloaks, whatever, to sell. They died. His dad was possibly the wealthiest man in Assisi. Francis was ready to inherit his entire business. And his dad got mad at him because his dad didn't approve of what he was doing, and then taking his dad's possessions and selling them to make money to rehab a church that had been basically shut down by the local Catholic authorities. There was no one having mass there, and whoever was there was gone except for possibly this priest. And now Francis had found a liking to it. But the people didn't like it, and his dad didn't like it. And his dad basically said, "No, I don't care if it's talking or not. Son, you need to come back and work with me, or I'm going to disown you, and the inheritance is not going to be left with you." So it went to the bishop of Assisi, who at that point sided with Francis's dad, saying, "Francis, basically your dad's right. You can't just take his possessions, go and rehab a church without any type of permission." And if he brought up about the talking cross, it was didn't make any difference. So anyway, his dad won, and Francis rejected his father, stripped naked, gave him everything, and returned to the talking cross for round 2.
So, you think that Francis's story is he shouldn't be a saint?
No, Francis at this time was obviously searching. He was very open, obviously, to something because nothing was working in his life. So he was raised Catholic, but the materialism and the gold and silver that poured through the streets of Assisi and his own house, it obviously got watered down, and it was a turnoff to him. So he was searching for something. And of course, the devil's going to see great potential, a future saint. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I got to distract this guy." And so the devil's going to be like, "Here, see this church? Rebuild this church, Francis." And thinking that this cross could then be venerated. And the cross has a phallic symbol right on the midsection, which when Francis ended up going to the Pope because he got rejected by the bishop, by his dad, by people in the town, everybody turned their back on him. In the meantime, he's thinking he's got a talking Jesus telling him to do something, and he's not getting any cooperation. So him and his brothers went to the Pope and said, "What's going on? What's the problem?" And the story goes that, the Bishop of Assisi was there at the time, so he was aware of what was going on. And he arranged in some way for him to get a meeting with the Pope, which was near impossible. The Pope initially listened to him, didn't react. That night had a dream of some sort, brought Francis back, says, "Look, let's make a deal." And so Francis was approved by the Pope, but in exchange, the Franciscan and Francis adapted the tau cross as the official symbol of the community, and the San Damiano cross was then placed into hiding for 700 years.
I do like the tau cross. Tau cross is more accurate cross of what actually Christ would have been crucified on, as opposed to like a plus sign. I do like that cross. But so who had the cross for after Francis?
So the Clares, the women who wanted to live like Francis, a life of poverty, radical poverty for Christ, they were placed in charge of hiding, keeping it hidden from everyone. The public was not allowed to see that ever. And there was papal documents forbidding any man to enter this San Damiano chapel turned convent, basically, for the poor Clares. Basically saying that no one is permitted within this convent without express written permission from the Holy Father himself. And Clare never left that convent from the day she stepped foot in it. She never left her entire life.
What does that have to do with the cross?
Because she kept guard. She had taken some type of solemn promise to...
She thought it was... Do you think that she was venerating the cross?
I don't think they were venerating it, because they're known for Eucharistic adoration, the Clares. They would adore the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, and they were always seen before a crucifix, not that one. So I believe it was a strict, just like people who guard the Ark of the Covenant or any type of item. Now, exorcists, for example, well, the Vatican has satanic items in their vault under the guard of exorcists, So Clare obviously was an exorcist. She had exorcism powers. They felt it was safe as opposed to burning it or making a big whatever.
Well, an interesting artifact that the Vatican has is they have one of Hitler's artifacts, the lance that pierced Christ's side. I know it might be broken up, so I don't know if they actually have his, but it's a spear lance that the emperors and great leaders of armies would take around Europe and conquer with it, and there's like a lot of lore that if they would drop it, oftentimes they would end up being killed a couple minutes later. But then that's the artifact that the Vatican has at the moment. So at what point do you think Francis became a saint?
Well, Francis was all about poverty because his dad was the wealthiest man in Assisi, and Clare came from a very wealthy family, and that mixed with the Catholicism of the day, which was Inquisition time. This was the time of the Inquisition. That's why whoever painted that icon never signed their name, because a phallic image was clearly a radical concept to take a Roman pagan ritual of fertility and mix it in with Christ on the cross was a pretty bold move. And this was probably the first one of that type. That's why there was no signature. But later, that next, 1250 AD, 1260, the Renaissance and this art started creeping up more. You showed me these pictures of erect Christ on the cross, and even Mary, gripping erection, and because the blood all. And this type of art, it didn't fly. It didn't get accepted. The church didn't really like it. So, and we still don't like it. So that's why after 700 years, under the strict care of the Clares, 1957, Pope Pius XII was on his deathbed when it was taken out of hiding.
This was like 1300s, 1400s.
You remember those paintings you
From
sent me?
the Renaissance. That was 1350.
Well, that was post Damiano.
It's like
That's what I'm saying.
1350.
Yeah. I can't check it. But so it's post Damiano. Is what I'm saying. I believe the San Damiano is probably the first of its sort that.
It's interesting. It certainly doesn't look like good abs. That's all I can say.
No, and any artist would say no, because if you look at the detail, it's really done with a lot of detail, and then all of a sudden they're going to just do like a little cartoonish abs. It doesn't make any sense. It's not consistent. So, but fertility is something that was important to these Roman women, and all these stories, if they couldn't, if they were infertile, they would do anything to get pregnant. There was so much pressure. And so they would worship the god Priapus, who was, he was actually infertile, but they would worship his genitalia, and it was a phallic, and they would bring gifts and whatever, and they would get pregnant. So the phallic symbol itself, is known to be a fertility object. And to put that on a crucifix and then spread it in Catholic communities, and it ended up in Steubenville, Ohio. That's the headquarters where it's produced. Father Sam Tisi, who was an accused abuser of women on campus, was the one who brought it to America. He was the TOR who brought it to America. And it's still to this day, and they're selling it for thousands of dollars, telling people that it was really Jesus who talked to Francis, and that was the church never said this is a valid miracle, anything. It wasn't mentioned at his canonization. And the reality is, what he told Francis did, and it was a disaster. So people later said, what Jesus really meant was, Francis, rebuild my spiritual church. So they're saying that Francis was talking to Jesus within inches, and he misunderstood what Jesus said. So that's what I'm saying. It's not possible. Why would Jesus go through the trouble of appearing to someone?
You can lie to yourself.
Well, the point is, Jesus has never, ever appeared through a piece of wood before. Okay? That's not consistent with any tradition of his apparitions. I once heard someone said something about Aquinas.
So what about like a statue of Mary starts crying, or crucifix of Jesus, the blood starts dripping. Those type of stories you think are all bogus?
I'm saying Jesus, who is God, okay, to appear through a painted image that is biblically inaccurate. They have his 2 feet are crucified separately. You have conversations going on beneath him. Well, point is, the folk, it's not, it's bogus. It's like it's an imposter. It's not legit. Someone was trying to sneak a phallic symbol into the church is what they were doing. And if you want to theologize...
Baron von Steuben is a confirmed Freemason, homosexual, and he's the mascot at the school. So, I don't know. It's very interesting. Definitely everything is up to be questioned. Nothing's off limits. And, except for dogma, you want to talk about the question. You think the Catholic Church says that the Orthodox are not heretics, they're just schismatic. But the Orthodox explicitly deny dogma 147 that states papal infallibility when speaking ex cathedra, which means that they're denying a dogma, made a whole church around denying a dogma. And they're not a heretic?
Well, that is really interesting you brought that up at the same exact time that Archbishop Vigano has been charged with schism. And that is actually like what our next show is going to be about, Joe. So thank you for like giving everybody a sneak preview. But yeah, we have to talk about what's going on with Archbishop Vigano and the Pope and what this means and why, yes, Vatican III seems to be like super important because we got a sinking ship here, folks. And before, everybody jumps ship, we need to try to rectify the situation. So thank you for tuning in, and hopefully Franciscan University will choose not to continue to put this San Damiano image in front of people who are offended by it. And these are people who care about the school and the children, the youth there at the school, and are very happy that Franciscan is so pro-life. And obviously the Tau Cross, like you said, is a very legitimate symbol of Christianity. And Francis himself embraced it. So I would like to see the Franciscans embrace the cross that their founder embraced. And I don't think that's asking too much. And, when you see St. Francis insisting on poverty and then the prices that they're making on this, it's just such a contradiction. So, and Vatican II, we're going to have to continue to talk about it because this happened right before Vatican II. So it really, spiritually speaking, is kind of creepy, especially if, the things that were heard about Vatican II. And, the Pope Pius XII, who was sick, he was the Pope during Hitler's time. He couldn't sleep at night the last 2 years of his life. And they said, he didn't speak out against Hitler enough. And there was a lot of controversy about that. But he couldn't sleep, so...
They had the rat tunnels. They gave Vatican passports and money to Nazis to escape after the war.
So this guy wasn't able...
And the Vatican flew flags on Hitler's birthday for years.
Well, like I said, there's a lot of confusion, and this Pope wasn't able to make any decision. He was considered Orthodox, and he had a guy that was supposed to replace him, Cardinal Siri, and he won twice. And they elected a pope, and he rejected it twice because of the Freemasons threatened his family. This can all be found. So they wanted John the 23rd, and we got Vatican.
People don't know about the Freemasons.
We got Vatican too.
They don't know about the Freemasons.
So anyway, there's a lot to be. I mean, the point is we got to come clean. That's still, God's given us time to come clean if we've made mistakes, because we don't want to be culpable, liable of leading people to worship the beast, okay? Or the image of the beast. All right, God bless. Okay, thank you.